Now, what a lot of them are going to do is try to go to Second Ezra. Let's actually read something about Second Ezra, because they're going to try to invoke Second Ezra 13. Now, we're going to deal with that passage to show how they're misreading that, and we're going to show what an actual Israelite had to say about the Northern Kingdom, because that's who they try to associate the people of the Native American groups with the quote unquote Northern Kingdom. You know, like Gad is a part of the Northern Kingdom, and you know what I mean. So, Second Ezra, scholars agree. Let me say this loud and clear. Scholars agree that Second Ezra is actually a compilation of 3 separate works, none of which have anything to do with the time of Ezra. The prophet Ezra is a visionary in these writings. The first section, chapters 1 and 2, basically affirms the rejection of the Jews in favor of the Christian church. It is believed that Christians wrote these chapters themselves, probably around the middle of the 2nd century CE, that's AD. The second section is the longest and is comprised of chapters 3 through 14. This is an apocalyptic composition that addresses God's plans for the future of Israel. It is believed that Jews wrote this piece around 100 CE, that's AD. So this is long after the time of the Assyrians, and yet, you know, this wasn't written by Ezra. This has nothing to do with Ezra. The last 2 chapters, 15 through 16, are the third section. This was also written by Christians, and it's thought to be even later. It's thought to be even later than the first section, possibly written in the 3rd century CE. That's AD. It is comprised of oracles of doom addressed to the enemies of God's people, who are now represented by the Christian church. So Second Ezra doesn't have to do anything with the time of Ezra. Let's just establish that. What a lot of them like to do is go to this section. They'll go to chapter 13, and they'll go to about verse 39. And this is a more accurate translation for the audience. And as for your seeing him gather to himself another multitude that was peaceable, these are the 9 tribes that were taken away from their own land into the exile in the days of Hoshea, whom Shalmaneser, king of the Assyrians, made captives. He took them across the river, and they were taken into another land. Notice it says he took them across the river, not across an ocean or a sea,
right?
A river. And they were taken into another land. But they formed this plan for themselves that they would leave the multitude of the nations and go to a more distant region where no human had ever lived, so that there at least they might keep their statutes that they had not kept in their own land. And they went in by the narrow passages of the river Euphrates. For at that time, the Most High performed signs for them and stopped the channels of the river until they had crossed over. Though that region there was a long way to go, a journey of 1.5 years, and that country is called Arzareth. So they'll look at this and they'll say, see, this has to be talking about the Americas. Notice it talked about the river Euphrates. Remember this, because in a moment, I'm going to show you guys something. So this is from the International Standard Encyclopedia, and it reads Arzareth. Arzareth, the King James Version, and then you see the spelling there. This is the land to which the 10 tribes were deported, 2 Ezra 13:45. It is described as another land lying 1.5 years journey beyond the river, i.e. the Euphrates. It probably answers to the Hebrew edit, Aksharet, in Deuteronomy 29:28. So basically, there are people who believe it's a corruption of that word. In Josephus's time, the people were still believed to be there in countless numbers. Now, let's go to that Josephus reference. Let's see what he has to say. Now, look what it says right here. This is important. Now, this has nothing to do with 2nd Ezra, but he's going to mention Ezra anyway. When Ezra had received this epistle, he was very joyful and began to worship God and confess that he had been the cause of the king's great favor to him, and that for the same reason he gave all the thanks to God. So he read the epistle at Babylon to the Jews that were there, but he kept the epistle itself and sent a copy to all those of his own nation that were in Media. And when these Jews understood what piety the king had towards God and what kindness he had for Ezra, they were all greatly pleased. Nay, many of them took their effects with them and came to Babylon, and very desirous of going down to Jerusalem. But then the entire body of the people of Israel remained in that country. Wherefore there are but 2 tribes in Asia and Europe subject to the Romans, while the 10 tribes are beyond the Euphrates till now, and are an immense multitude, and not to be estimated by number. He's talking about in a region that he was aware of in his day, not the Americas, because how would he know that they were over there in big numbers if the numbering is being relayed on the basis of having actually observed them? Now there came a great number of priests and Levites and porter and sacred singers and sacred servants to Ezra. So he gathered those that were in the captivity together beyond the Euphrates and stayed there 3 days and ordered them to fast for them. Now, I just wanted to stop right there because it shows you that in his day, the people were in a known part of the world. They were in a region that was known. It was right there within a vicinity where they could actually know about them. And it was in a vicinity where the Euphrates was located. And guess what? The Euphrates is not here in the Americas. So therefore, this cannot possibly be in reference to the Americas. That's a cut because it shows you that the people were in a vicinity, in a region that was known by the Jews of Josephus's day, and it was in a proximity where they could actually locate them. Now, let me show you guys something. Let's go with the scriptures. Do we have an example? Do we have any example of any of the people of the northern kingdom coming back to the land in the time of the return from the exile? Well, let's actually look. First Chronicles chapter 9, ESV. I know Hebrew Israelites, I know you don't like any other translation but your precious King James that was made by a European Anglican king with European Anglican translators. So look what it says right here. First Chronicles chapter 9. So all Israel was recorded in genealogies, and these are written in the book of the kings of Israel. And Judah was taken into exile in Babylon because of their breach of faith. Now the first to dwell again in their possessions in their cities were Israel, the priests and the Levites and the temple servants, and some of the people of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh lived in Jerusalem. That's why when you and by the way, they weren't the only tribe. That's why when you get to the New Testament, Luke chapter 2 and verse 36, who do we see in the land in verse 36? You have, and there was a prophetess Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. That's the northern kingdom. Now notice where they are, Jerusalem. Notice it says Jerusalem there. So this article is entitled, right at the top here, let's see if I could find it. Ancient DNA confirms Native Americans' deep roots in North and South America. Trove of ancient samples reveals 11,000 years of unknown genetic history. And it reads, for decades, scientists could describe the peopling of the Americas only in broad strokes, leaving plenty of mysteries about when and how people spread across the continents. Now, state-of-the-art ancient DNA methods applied to scores of new samples from around the Americas are filling in the picture. 2 independent studies published in Cell and online in Science find that ancient populations expanded rapidly across the Americas about 13,000 years ago. They also emphasize that the story continued in thousands of years since, revealing previously undocumented large-scale movements between North and South America. Huh, sounds a lot like the Bering Straits, huh? We actually get down to it.
But this is the genome from the Anzic child. Okay? So Faithful has said it multiple times. He's also going to provide more receipts. But in this article, let's scroll down. Here's the information. I'll slow down a little bit for you, but I got one little Faithful. What does that say there?
We determined the Y chromosome haplogroup to be QL54. So that's the haplogroup of the people of Montana, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Right. And that's the haplogroup of the Anzic child.
Yeah.
And that's the child. And also, what is that the haplogroup of, Faithful?
Oh, we're about to find we're about to find out right now, my brother. Let me actually share my screen.
All right, share your
It's
screen.
also the haplogroup of Central and South American indigenous peoples. So it's not just merely the people that live in North America, the various tribal groups in North America, because they're also predominantly QM3, or they fall under the QL54 branch. QM3 is a downstream of it. As we see right here, haplogroup branches, and by the way, this article deals with the genetic ancestry of Native Americans. Haplogroup Q branches are currently found in many indigenous peoples of Asia and the Americas. Most Native American Y chromosomes belong to haplogroup Q and lie within the branch QL54. In QM3, you notice right here, because the same article mentions right here, you see QM3 right there, right? You see it? You see QM3? Y'all see my screen? QM3?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. QM3 subclade of haplogroup QL54. You see it? So it's under the umbrella of QL54. That's specific, and it shows that Native Americans, one, they're not Israelites because the people that were over here had that haplogroup, and the people that were over here pre-exist Abraham. How can they be Abraham's descendants if they pre-exist him in a different part of the world from him? So this is from the book Old Canaan and the New World, and I believe that this is page 201. So it reads, in the specific context of the Americas, DNA testing among Native American populations has had the most potentially unsettling consequences for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because of its main scripture, the Book of Mormon, asserts a Hebraic ancestry for indigenous Americans. In 2002, the anthropologist Thomas Murphy, a member of the church, examined the genetic information available about Native American populations at that time and concluded, while DNA shows that ultimately all human populations are closely related, to date, no intimate genetic link has been found between ancient Israelites and indigenous Americans, much less within the time frame suggested by the Book of Mormon. Let's actually listen into some geneticists, some of whom are still in the LDS Church, the Latter-day Saints Church, who have to admit that the evidence doesn't point in the direction of either Mormons and let alone Hebrew Israelites who try to make these same wacky arguments.
Overwhelming evidence negates the Book of Mormon claim that the American Indian represents a genealogical descendant from Israel.
Thomas Murphy is a Mormon scholar and the chair of the anthropology department at Edmonds Community College in Lynnwood, Washington. He is working on his doctorate at the University of Washington on the DNA issue that faces his religion.
We are in a dilemma now. The genetic evidence shows clearly that American Indians are not Hebrews. They are not Israelites. Stephen L. Whittington, for example, is one of the leading experts on the genetics of the peoples of Central America.
Most of my research has taken place in the Maya area. I personally have never seen any evidence of Hebrew origins for Native Americans.
If Hebrew immigrants populated the Americas, there would also be a strong Hebrew influence found in the languages and archaeology of the New World.
All the evidence we have, and we have evidence from probably in the neighborhood of 800 to 900 different languages that are or have been spoken on this continent within the last few centuries, points against it. None of those languages that we have has ever shown any indications of having descended from Hebrew.
There's never been any evidence that would show us that there was an Israelite migration to the New World. Not in genetics or, for that matter, in any other source, historical, archaeological, or linguistic.
That was also deeply shocking to find that really there was not only DNA evidence, but now, as it turns out, there's no linguistic, there's no archaeological evidence. There's essentially nothing to link the old world with the new world.
Not only do the ancestors of Native Americans not come from Israel, but we know where they in fact came from, and that's from the northern part of East Asia.
The people that we can identify today
as Native Americans, the people that we can pull DNA from, their genetic markers are more closely related to people from Siberia.
It is very obvious to me that when Hebrew Israelites are making these bad claims, the genetic evidence is in there, the archaeological evidence, the linguistic evidence, and even the biblical evidence is in there, as we just read.